Hello and welcome to the final technical session for Module 6, Podcast Editing and Collaborative Production Models. This webinar is brought to you by the Digital Empowerment Project, a nationwide initiative organized by the 6 U.S. regional museum associations and dedicated to providing free, self-paced training resources for small museums. This inaugural series of online training focuses on digital media and technology topics, and it's made possible by funding from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. My name is Dan Yeager, Executive Director of the New England Museum Association. My pronouns are in the he/him series, and I am your host for today's program. In this era of virtual meetings, when digital spaces may substitute for our physical sense of place, it's important to reflect on the land we each occupy and honor the indigenous people who have called it home. I'm speaking to you from Swampscott, north of Boston, the historical homelands of the Massachusetts peoples. Wherever we're each located, let us acknowledge all indigenous nations as living communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. We, the Digital Empowerment Project, recognize that our organizations and those of our members were founded within a colonizing society which perpetuated the exclusions and erasures of many native peoples throughout the United States and beyond. We ask you to reflect on the place where you reside and work, and to respect the diversity of cultures and experiences that form the richness of our world and our profession. Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to welcome once again Hannah Heffman as our presenter. Hannah is the owner and executive producer of Better Lemon Creative Audio, a production company focused exclusively on museums, history, organizations, and cultural nonprofits. She's the author of the popular handbook, Your Museum Needs a Podcast, a step-by-step guide to podcasting on a budget. She's the 3-time winner of AAM's Muse Awards for podcasting, and her first podcast has been selected for collection by the U.S. Library of Congress. Hannah lives and works in historic Greenbelt, Maryland. Hannah, thanks for being with us here again today. Take it away.
Okie dokie. Webinar 3. And I didn't change the number on my slide, but I promise we're on webinar 3. So today we are going to talk about a few things. Software and tools for editing. I know we like the technical stuff here. We want to get those practical tips. We're talking about editing workflow because this is a huge thing. A lot of the editing software, honestly, I'm not just saying this because this is what I do. It's not too hard to figure out and learn. But getting your workflow correct is where you will prevent yourself from kind of hitting walls. We're going to talk about the principles of great editing, kind of some high view. What should you cut? What shouldn't you cut? How should you be approaching editing your audio? We're going to talk about where to find music and sound effects, and how and when to outsource editing and production. And as part of that, how you can kind of create a more bespoke arrangement there than the traditional brief that someone executes and brings back to you without your involvement. So let's start by talking about editing tools. The first editing tool, this one, I think was sent by the angels to people who want to do podcasting without being audio engineers. So Auphonic is a website where, and actually I'm on this tab, so I'm pretty sure I can just show you Auphonic. Yeah, so I hope you're seeing Auphonic right now. For pennies on the minute, you can upload your audio, and you can see the bottom one here is the original audio. And then Auphonic will basically do all your sound engineering for you. It will level it, do your noise removal and all that. And it's a very simple tool to use. So this is what you have to fill out if you want to do with Auphonic. And the only thing that's really not included is to check noise and hum reduction. It will put your podcast automatically at -16 LUFS volume. I don't really understand LUFS as a loudness measurement, but that's how loud your podcast should be. You want to make sure that your podcast is consistently loud, consistently volume across the episode, and then it's loud enough so that when someone's listening in the car or listening on as they're outside or walking, they don't like get all the way to the top of their volume and realize they still can't hear your show. That's a problem. So Auphonic is a very cool tool. The pricing is, again, pennies. It's a really, really tiny amount of money. And this will help you get your audio in as good of shape as possible before you start cutting and pasting and putting it where it needs to go. So I'm gonna go back to my slides here. So I recommend everyone run their audio through Auphonic before they start editing. And that will save you a lot of time messing with tools and stuff in your platforms. So then right away, I'm going to talk about a few different digital audio workstations. So DAWs. So some tools that you can use for editing your audio, cutting and pasting and getting it in the order you want it, getting it to sound like what you want. We're going to talk about Audacity, GarageBand, Hindenburg Journalist, and then Descript, which is kind of a hybrid tool. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to stop sharing right now and go into the actual tools to talk about them each for a few minutes. So I'm stopped sharing now and I'm going to go share. Give me a second here. Entire screen. Okay. So now we should see Audacity. So Audacity is a free open source editing platform. A lot of people like this or have liked it because A, it's free, B, because it's open source, there's a huge community of people who use it for all kinds of things. So if you want to learn it, this is what I started editing on. It's not necessarily my favorite now, as I will, for reasons I will explain. But if you just go into YouTube and type like Audacity Basics, you will have endless supply of tutorials on how to get started on Audacity, which is what I did when I first started podcasting. And there's an open source wiki as well. And then if you want, because so many people have used it for so many years through every version is fairly similar, anything you really encounter, you can probably YouTube it and someone will have done a demo on how to do it on Audacity. So you can see it's not too complicated. There's a little bit of a learning curve. Things aren't always aren't always obvious on here. Like you can see these tools up at the top right corner are kind of odd symbols, but this is kind of what an Audacity workstation looks like. You can see here, I've got some audio up on the top. I've got some music in a second track here, and I could zoom in and out to take a closer look at my audio here. And then I'll be able to go in and cut and paste things through here, which is the kind of the basics of editing audio, is mostly cutting things out that you don't want and moving things around. So you'll be able to see what the waves form looking there. So Audacity, again, can be a little clunky to use. It's destructive, which means once you delete some audio, like let's say I take this section here and I delete it, I can hit, Command Z or Control Z to undo. But short of that, your undo button, it is more or less destructive, which means that audio is more or less gone. So if I get, 25 minutes into editing and I realize that audio is no longer there, but I need it, I have to re-import this audio file and find it again and so on. So it can be a little scary working with that you can kind of mess up a little easier. So that's Audacity. The next one I want to show you is built into anyone who has a Mac, and that's GarageBand. And GarageBand is also a free tool. So if you have a Mac, whether a desktop or a laptop, you can use GarageBand. You can see it's a little sleeker in look. I think it's mostly designed for people who are making music. But the simplicity and the freeness of it does not mean it doesn't work pretty well. I can't really demo you anything because I don't use GarageBand, but I know a lot of people who are really happy with it. It's fairly simple to use. You can see tracks. I can add another track, add another audio track here, and I could add my other thing there. I can cut and paste just like with any other tool. So GarageBand's a great free one to use. GarageBand, again, there's going to be tons of tutorials on YouTube, or GarageBand should have their own tutorials. They have a little how to learn. When you first log in, it'll be like how to use tutorials that you can kind of play with those templates as well to get the feel for how it works. So Audacity and GarageBand are free tools. Now, the other tool I want to show you is my favorite, Hindenburg Journalist. And Hindenburg, there's a few different versions, like and packages you can buy. Sometimes you can rent it. Basically, you're going to think about spending $100, and you can get Hindenburg. And I think if you're planning on doing a podcast, it is well worth it to invest. You will save time that you would spend learning Audacity. So this is a project in Hindenburg for me. And you can see I have on my tracks. Here's a particularly complicated one. It's a non-destructive editing software. So let me actually zoom to the end here. What I really like about Hindenburg is it's the only one designed for telling audio stories versus music. Everything else is primarily music, and secondary is audio and radio stories. But Hindenburg has this clipboard on the side where you can import your files, and then you can also clip your files in here and then move them back over here. So if you look at like group 3 right in the middle here, this is where I've organized clips of narration. So I can change and rename all these bits, and that will help me keep track of all the different parts of my story. So it's really, really thinking about audio that has a text, that has a speech component. So I could pull this over here, for example. And what's great about it being non-destructive is, sorry, this is a little jumping around, a little confusing here. Let me get back to that. So let's say I cut out this bit right here in the middle. Then I'm working and so on. And 20 minutes later, I'm listening to this playback and I realize, uh-oh, I've cut that too short. I can just grab the end and pull it back out to whatever the original audio I imported into the software is. No matter how many times I do it, no matter how many changes I make to this software, if I've gone through and I've done something crazy with all of this, I can make fade in, fade out. It's very intuitive in that you grab the edges and move. So there's a kind of, it makes sense. I can still go, you know what? That was all wrong. Pull it back out. Here's my original audio. So that's one of the things I really like about Hindenburg. It's very simple. You can see up here, here are your main tools. There's really not that much you can do. If you're making music, this would be a nightmare because there's not that much you can do. But because it's designed for text-based things, let's see, I want to break that up. Everything is labelable. Set best part. So everything is labeled. I can label this best part. It helps you keep track of everything, and it's really simple to use. And if you run everything through Auphonic before you put it in here, you won't need to do anything else afterwards. You can clean it up and then export it. I use Hindenburg for almost everything that I do. So I'm going to go now back to my slides. No, sorry, I'm not going to go back to my slides. I'm going to go back to the entire screen and show you one more tool. And the other tool is Descript. Now, this is something that's new and totally different because while Hindenburg is an audio editor that is designed for audio that is spoken audio, right? Audio storytelling, radio. It's made for radio people. Descript is a platform designed to edit text vocals, right? Edit narrative stories like, speaking using the text. So instead of, you see down here, here is my audio. Instead of using cutting and pasting here, I can simply highlight the text and it will automatically cut out. You can see right here, well, if I hit backspace, it will automatically cut out that word. So this is I'm from a project I'm working on with the Archives of American Art. This episode is already out. It's for their podcast Articulated. Now, Descript is really, really, really good for organizing your story and putting it together. So you can see all these sections you can drag. You could take this section here and drag it up. Oh, it's not letting me drag. Sorry. I think it's the setting that I'm on. But you can put together and import all your files and then pull them right here, and it'll automatically transcribe them. And then you can just cut things out as you want, just by the same as you would editing text in a Word document. So it's a really familiar way. And if you're working with something where you're looking at the text, it's a really easy way to think about it and organize your project. Now, they do have a lot of new tools as well for cleaning up your sound, for doing your entire podcast in Descript. I like to then export it and clean it up a bit in, sorry, bouncing back and forth between these things. I hope this isn't making anyone dizzy. I like to then export it and clean it up in an audio editor, another audio editing platform, but that's my preference. There are lots of people who make podcasts entirely in Descript. So you can use Descript either to organize your story and put your story together, and we'll talk a little bit more about in a second, or you can use Descript to do your entire podcast. And especially if you're moving around a lot of parts, or if you're someone who really thinks by seeing the text in front of them, this is a great way to go. I'm also have recommended this to the London Metropolitan Archives I work with in London, and they've been using this and have been really happy with it. I think a lot of museum people have found it, we're all used to creating documents and typing up and organizing idea in text. So in that way, Descript can be a really, really, really helpful tool. Okay, so going back to my slides. So we just talked about Audacity, GarageBand, Hindenburg Journalist, and Descript. Now, of course, there are also lots of other tools like Adobe Audition, like Pro Tools, like Logic Pro. These are much more advanced audio tools. So these are a bit of they can be a bit tough to learn. They're not necessarily intuitive. But if you already know how to use Adobe Audition for something, for example, or you already make music, or you already do some kind of production, and that's the tool you already use, go for it. If you're already used to using Audacity and you feel comfortable there, use it. If you're already using something else to edit, use it. It's really about, again, like I've said in the other webinars, it's about results. If it sounds good in the end, it does not matter what you use. Don't feel like you have to use something fancy just because that's what someone else says. If it's working for you, that's fine. But those are some of the tools that I might recommend you take a look at. Again, Hindenburg Journalist is my favorite. And Hindenburg has a really, really excellent set of tutorials on, to Hindenburg while I talk. Hindenburg has a really, really excellent set of tutorials on their website. So if you go on there, you can do a 30-day free download trial. And then you can, if you just watch through all their little tutorials, it's like how to do every little thing, and then practice trying a few of those things. And I think you'll find that it took me, even a few years ago, it only took me a day to learn Hindenburg. A day of playing around, I think, will get anyone who has any sense for this kind of up and running. Okay. So those are some tools. If you have more questions about those, make sure to put those in the chat, and the moderators will get those to me at the end. Let's talk about editing workflow. So the order. But first I want to talk about how audio editing, there's kind of two ways of approaching it, kind of cutting down to the story or building up the story. So if you've got a simple interview episode and it's just, one person interviewing, one person question, maybe an intro and outro at the end, editing that interview can be more like whittling down something in like this image of wood, whittling down to what you want left. So you'll go through and you'll cut until it's what you want. If you're building a more complex narrative or documentary episode, instead what you might be doing is taking clips from different interviews and different bits of narration and putting them in order how you want them. And then once you have them in order, clean them up and make it into a smooth, finished product, just like sort of the image of the cutting board on the end, where you're taking multiple pieces of wood, trimming them down to the size you want, putting them all together, and then finishing it all off once you have it where you want it. So I like to have those two kind of metaphors just to kind of conceptualize the two different approaches you can do. Again, on the left, a simple interview. On the right, if you have more you're working with. So it's kind of a different approach based on the type of episode you're making. So what I like to do is, first things first, I have my audio, whether it's a single interview or whether it's 15 interviews that I'm cutting down to one episode. Get a transcript. You can use Temi, it's like 15 cents a minute, or Rev if you can afford to pay a bit more, I think like $1.25 per minute, or any other transcription, Otter.ia, everyone has their own favorite transcription service that you use to something else. Get a transcript and have it so that you can work side by side. Because, with video, you can see what you're editing as you go. You can like scroll through your shots or your frames. With audio, all you're seeing is this waveform the whole way. So it's really important to have some sort of visualization of the story. And that way, if you're thinking, do I need to cut this out? You can scroll down to see what else did I say and look for things. And it just really makes it easier to work side by side with text and audio. So once I have a transcript of all my audio files, I then process all my audio files with Auphonic. So we've talked about that in the beginning. That's that website, auphonic.com. And then make sure that they are all labeled and organized in a specific file where you want to work on your project on your desktop or your computer. This is really important. You may think, I'll remember which file I have, but you won't, and you will lose things. So really, really make sure things are organized and labeled at the beginning. This is really important. Then once you have that, you're going to open up your transcript side by side with your editing software. And this is the kind of basic workflow that I would use for either a simple interview podcast or a more complex documentary narrative style show. Then, if you're doing a single interview, the following steps would be, or maybe an interview with 2 or 3 people where it's just the interview and the questions back and forth, one continuous conversation, is with each speaker on their own track, right? I've shown you in all these, you can do different tracks. Go through, get them all, roughly lined up, right, in order. Then you go through making any content cuts. So this is, this sentence, that sentence, we're going to cut out this question. I want to cut out this word that they said that I don't want. I want to end the interview 2 minutes earlier than the audio ends, and so on. So you're making these big decisions on what's being talked about and where, and any obvious fine edits. So coughs, long pauses, etc. So we're going through and we're doing our to go back to our woodworking example, I don't woodwork, I'm making this up. We do our first layer of sanding, right? The kind of rough first pass over to get it in a decent condition. Once you've gone start to finish like that, then I like to go back and go through doing fine editing. So breaths, pauses, little noises. These are the little get as perfection as you want or don't, right? From the end. And the reason I like to do that is because if you try to do it all at once, it's hard to focus on the content and the flow of the conversation. And also, if you're focusing on the flow of the conversation and what's being said, you might miss a lot of these fine details that would be annoying when you listen back as a listener. So I like to do them 1 and then 2. So going back in layers. Then I'm going to add my intro, outro narration if I have it, and then music on separate tracks, clean those up, make sure they're ready to go. Then once everything feels like it's in order and it's been edited, I like to listen once more. But first I export it so that I can listen in iTunes or on my phone or with some headphones, just to listen to it in a different environment and make sure that it sounds the way I want to, and then take any notes or stop and fix things as I hear them. And then if you've made any big changes, again, export and listen once more through. And that's just an example of how a simple interview would be set up in Hindenburg. So you can see up top, there's a track for my narration, which I don't have in this little example here. Then there's the interview and the questions, and then you can see the music on the bottom. So you can see all the little cuts where I've made small edits, and then you can see the big content cuts or where each section stops and starts. Not too crazy, I hope. So then going back, if you are doing a narrative audio documentary, what I like to do is have all my separate interviews transcribed in separate documents. And then as I choose clips to cut into my story, I cut and paste them into a master script and transcript. So what you'll do is you'll rough edit each interview, kind of just like you did with the regular interview, and then isolating the clips you'd like to use, and then making sure to match your work in your transcript. So as you choose a clip, let's say a 1-minute clip to use, highlight, mark, bold, cut and copy, however you mark that section in the transcript, that's what you want to use, that's what you've clipped in your audio editor, do the same thing. Then you're going to determine the order of clips and write narration and transitions between them. So again, this is where something like Descript comes in handy, because you can visualize this at the same time. Instead of having a transcript and an audio editor next to it, it's all combined in one. So you can kind of just cut and drag and drop your text and your audio will follow. So again, Descript and Hindenburg both have that text component that allows you to visualize what you're doing. Once you've got your order of clips in narration, your order of your interview clips in the order you want them. Let's say we're going to have this person talk about this person talk about this, then this person talk about this. It doesn't have to be too complicated. You might want to write or your narration, and then you assemble all the audio clips into one project in order. Again, you can kind of see here all the things assembled in order. Let's say I've got my questions and I drag them in. However, it's hard to talk about this without talking about a specific audio platform, but however that gets dragged and dropped in there. Once everything's in order, then I go through a round of two of fine editing. So making large adjustments as needed where things don't sound right. Like, oh, that's a bit sudden. I'm going to make a change here. I'm going to move this section to the front, but going through and cleaning up and listening again to the flow of how everything goes. Then I add music and sound effects if you have them. You don't have to, and have one more listen through around fine editing again. Export and check your work afterwards. So this might be a lot of text here, but I wanted to put this in order here so that you can reference this workflow later once you start doing your editing. And this is what a more complex story, again, like I showed you before, looks like in Hindenburg. You can see I have my music at the top. I have the script for Alyssa as the narrator. I have the interview with Hilda. I have the interview with Dr. Kate Lister. I have the interview with a company called Fur. And you can see how I've dragged those all into order and how everything is on its own track. And I've clipped those bits and dragged them from the clipboard. And then I go through, once everything's in order, and listen for small edits and overall flow of the story. So that's workflow. Again, if you have questions, throw those in the comments now, and the moderators will get those to me at the end. I know this can be a bit confusing. I'm trying to give you a high overview so that you have a good sense of how things work, so that when you get in and get started, you use best practices instead of tripping yourself up by doing things the long way. So next, we're going to talk about the actual what to cut and what to keep, right? So I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to play for you an unedited clip that I did from a shark museum in Bjarnarhöfn in Western Iceland. So I'm going to play this clip. This is an interview that I did, 4 years ago. It's not the best audio quality, and we'll just listen through, and then I'll go and play you a quick edit. So you can hear the difference between raw audio and an edit, and then we'll talk about what we can draw out of that. So I'm going to hit play here, and I hope you'll be able to hear this. I'm actually going to stop sharing now and reshare just to make sure that the audio gets shared on this, because I know there's no one to hear me, no one to tell me if you can't hear me. So share screen. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Go ahead and introduce yourself and tell me why you're here and what, like you personally, why you are here and what you do here.
Well, my name is Kristján Hildebrandsson, and this here is a family museum. My father founded this museum, and yeah, now I'm here.
Okay. So why is there a shark museum here in Bjarnarhöfn?
Well, there is no short answer. My grandfather was a shark hunter, and well, generations, 400 years back, probably with gaps though. And like when my grandfather stopped hunting sharks, back then he used to live in Vestfjörður, the peninsula north from here, in an area where there were a lot of sharks. But once he stopped, he moved here to this farm, which was much better farming land. And the bay here is so shallow, there are no sharks for many kilometers. But after he moved here, people kept asking him if he had some shark meat, so he would just buy one on one every once in a while, prepare it for himself and for others. It just kind of grew into all this. Like we never planned for this. It just sort of happened.
It just sort of happened. So that's the unedited audio. You can hear there's a lot of noises where I'm mishandling the microphone. He pauses a lot. He's kind of struggling to articulate what he wants to say. It's still fun to listen to, but it can be a little hard to follow the story, especially without a transcript in front of you. So here's a quick 5-minute edit that I did of this, and let's have a listen and you can see how much easier it is to hear what he's saying. I added some music too.
Well, my name is Kristján Hildebrandsson, and this here is a family museum. My father founded this museum. My grandfather was a shark hunter, and generations, 400 years back, probably with gaps though. And when my grandfather stopped hunting sharks, back then he used to live in Vestfjörður, the peninsula north from here, in an area where there were a lot of sharks. But once he stopped, he moved here to this farm, which was much better farming land. But the bay here is so shallow, there are no sharks for many kilometers. After he moved here, people kept asking him if he had some shark meat, so he would just buy one on one every once in a while, prepare it for himself and for others. It just kind of grew into all this. Like we never planned for this. It just sort of happened.
So you can see here that overall I've shortened it by half a minute, even with the music. That just gives you a sense of how music can really take the story somewhere else. I've cut out a lot of his pauses. I've cut out some of his digressions. I've taken his sentences and just kind of made them flow a bit better. It still sounds like him. I haven't tried to change what he's saying. I haven't tried to make him not sound Icelandic. Or tried to, cut out every digression or right? Like I've left some of his natural speech in there. And then, in one place he says, we moved here, it was much better farming land. And then originally says, and the bay here is so shallow. But really what he meant to say was, but the bay here is so shallow. So I found a but somewhere else and I moved it over there just so that it was easier for people to hear. And in my mind, the ideal is when someone listens and they say, oh, you made me sound better than I sounded. So we're helping the person that's talking. We're elevating their speech a bit. We're just cleaning it up and presenting it in a way that makes it easier to listen to the audience. I've also cut myself out of a lot of here because, well, you don't need to hear me say, well, what's your name and where are we, right? He's going to answer that question already. So I've cut myself out where I didn't think it was helpful or added anything to the listening experience. I've gone through and trimmed up all the mic bumps that I did, not knowing what I was doing with that particular mic on that day. And I think overall it sounds better. So here are some broad editing tips. Again, like I said, you want to make it easy to listen to the person without altering the meaning or natural voice of the speaker. We're not trying to make them sound like someone else, and we're never changing their meaning. So what that means is if someone has a digression where they kind of just trail off and then come back to the sentence, that's okay to cut out that digression so that it's easier to understand the sentence as they intended to deliver it. However, if the digression is something like, I'm telling you this, and I want you to know that I didn't come up with this idea. This is an idea from my mentor, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm not going to cut out that digression because that would change what they wanted to say. That would be an unethical edit. Or if the digression is, and I'm saying this as an individual and not on behalf of the museum, well, that's important. That needs to stay in there. So not changing the meaning of their sentence, just cleaning up the sentence like a good editor would on text, right? And then the question I always like to ask myself as I'm going through over and over is, does the listener need to know this detail or this bit of background or this so and whatever for them to understand and enjoy the story or the episode as a whole? So it can be really easy when you've done an interview and it's 40 minutes and you need to get it down to 30 minutes and all the 40 minutes is good. It's like everything's good. I really want them to hear this digression about the role of the railroad in our town. But if the story is about the women's suffrage movement and the railroad is not relevant, it's just a fun digression that's interesting on its own, but it doesn't contribute to the overall story and it adds time, I would lean towards cutting that and maybe sharing it as a bonus little bit later, but thinking about the overall listenability of this episode. If we're going all over the place and not keeping everything focused and tight, it's going to be harder for people to follow, and they're at the end not going to get as much out of it, even if there's more content. So does the listener need to know this in order to enjoy the story, in order to understand the history? Or can we simplify that and take this bit out to give them more time to focus on the main theme, if that makes sense? And then in terms of pacing, I like to ask, is every 5-minute section as interesting as the rest? Is the first 5 minutes really good? And then if I listen to the second 5 minutes, I'm like, this is a really boring 5 minutes. If I only gave them this 5 minutes, they would probably trail off. So you want to keep, and sometimes that can even be good to think in 3-minute sections. Is this section interesting? Is this section interesting? If not, why is it long? Do I need to move something else around to change the order of the information? Is this too wordy? Can this be said in less? Can I cut it in half? Can I trim this down in any way? Can I introduce a break? Can I introduce narration? What can I do to make this 5 minutes interesting, whether it's cutting or adding? So going through and listening, making sure that you're not getting 10 minutes that are really interesting in the beginning, and then the last 20 minutes just kind of dragging on, So kind of making sure that it has a consistent pacing, a consistent sense of interest, and story throughout. And then a really important thing to think about when editing is the information being delivered in the order needed to follow it easily? So when you are listening to audio, you can't stop and restart the sentence like you can when you're reading a book. And it can be easy to kind of drift off mentally and not absorb, for example, the image that might happen in a visual documentary. So it's really important to give people the information that they need to know in the story in the order that they need to do it. So if you're talking about something and you haven't introduced it yet, and someone does the basics, the introduction later in their interview, you might want to cut that and move it to the beginning so that they know what they're hearing about when they get to it. Just thinking about order of listening. When you're editing, it can be really easy to get lost in the material, and you've listened to it 20 times and you never want to hear it again. And so it's hard to tell if the order is important or the order is working. So get someone outside to listen and maybe take notes as they go if there's any areas where they were confused or they weren't sure what was happening. So in terms of how to begin, I like to start by telling people, do a little simple practice interview, whether it's on your phone or on your new equipment. Something short, 5 minutes, that you can scrap and restart as needed. And if you accidentally deleted the entire file, oh well. So import that into your audio editor and get really, really comfortable playing around and learning the 5 or 6 important functions that you use 95% of the time. Most of these software have a lot of different tools, but you are going to use the same handful over and over and over again. So play around with it, get it where you like. And then once you begin on episode 1, give yourself a deadline. It can be, you can take an episode, no matter how simple, and work on it for 5 months. But this is not like kind of the novel that we may publish one day in our life. This is a product that you need to put out, a program that you need to put out for your museum. So give yourself a deadline, a reasonable deadline, work on it, get it as good as you can by then, and then do better on episode 2. Get episode 2 out by your deadline. Work on episode 3, do better, and so on and so on. Obviously, it has to be to a certain standard, but with podcasting, it's one of those things where if you're not publishing, it's not a podcast. It's an audio program on your computer. So better to have something out there and to get better than to never release it and kind of spend a lot of time tinkering on episode 1 and getting episode 1 perfect, but then never having an episode 2. All right, music and sound effects. I think a general rule of thumb to think about with music is less is more. You don't want it to overwhelm anything. If you are not feeling comfortable or sure about how you want to use music, listen to your favorite podcasts that are in the style you want to do. See if you like the way they use the music or you don't, and pay attention accordingly. You can just use a little music in the intro and outro. It can be the same song every single episode. Something that doesn't overwhelm the music, something that adds ambiance and adds emotion without being just taking over, right? Because the voice and the speaking is always going to be the most important thing. And sound effects, you do not have to use sound effects, but they can be fun sometimes to add a cannon or a bird singing. There's shows like I did Smithsonian Stories from Main Street, where I used tons of sound effects of water and birds and trees, and I went nuts with it, and I think it sounded really good. But if you're starting out, I would say, be a little err on the side of less. Where are you going to find this stuff? It has to be copyright free, or you have to have permission from the copyright holder. You cannot just grab something off the internet and use it. This seems obvious, but some people, this is news, which is okay if it's news to you. But remember, it's important. So tools that I like, Soundstripe is like $12 or $15 a month, and it lets you license unlimited tracks for that within that fee. You can sign up for just 1 month and then cancel once you've got the music you want, and you will still have a license. The key is you just can only use it for the thing you've licensed it for. So if you license it for your podcast, you can't use that same track for a video project that you're doing that's separate unless you relicense it. And they have great music, and you can sort by mood and sound and instrument and genre. Really, really love Soundstripe. That's where I get 95% of my music. Epidemic Sound is a similar platform. It's $30 a month. Again, you can sign up and then cancel after the first month and get a bunch of music. The Free Music Archive has tons of music on it, and a lot of it's bad. But there is some good stuff in there. And you do also need to be aware that not everything on there is public domain. So sometimes it's under an attribution license. So you might have to give credit to the artist. So just be aware of the licensing when you're looking at Free Music Archive. The other thing you can do is pay an indie or unsigned artist directly. Say, hey, reach out. We'd like to use your music in our podcast. What would you charge us? Or we have this much money to pay you for to use your music as our soundtrack for our podcast. I have done that with a lot of artists. There's so much music out there online that is not connected to a record label and a complicated machine of bureaucracy. The other thing is to do a bespoke commission. You can ask an artist, a creator in your community, someone who works with your museum, to create a soundtrack piece that you can use in your podcast. For sound effects, Freesound is super, super cool. People upload sounds I don't know why particularly. I think it's fun. They go record sounds. I mean, anything you want. You want the sound, a fake volcano noise. You want the sound of a tree falling. You want the sound of a teacup stirring. You want the sound of a Baltimore street. You want the sound of underwater in an Icelandic harbor. These are all things that I have found on Freesound. Again, check the license, make sure it's public domain. If not, make sure you have the attribution to attribute, credit people correctly. And then Soundly, there's a free and a paid version. It's basically a sound effects library. So this is really good for ambiance. You want water running, you want a farm, you want animals, you want children running and laughing. That's really good for that. Lastly, I'm going to take 5 minutes from the question section to talk about outsourcing. So you may need some help. This may not, or you may not have the time to do everything yourself. Here are some terms you might need to know if you're planning on outsourcing. An editor, audio editor, cuts and organizes and assembles your audio as instructed, typically charges by the hour. This is kind of a loose definitions here, but if you're hiring an editor, you're more likely to just say, here's what I want. Can you clean this up, finish it, do what you want? So, I work with the Smithsonian Archives of American Art, and they put together their episode in Descript. They have it exactly how they want it. They've written it. They've edited, they've cut the clips the size they want, and they've marked notes, and then they say, here, Hannah, here's the music, here are our clips, here's our narration, put it together, clean it up, make it sound good. And so that's what I do. A producer is someone who typically is more of a showrunner, right? So they may also be doing the editing. There's a lot of shows where I produce and I edit. They're typically more involved with the creative side of the show, right? They could be conducting interviews, planning stories, etc. So the Migration Museum in the UK outsourced to a longtime audio producer, and she did the interviews, wrote the narration, put it together in collaboration with them on the subject matter they wanted to talk about. And that can be more or less involved. And then there's also, of course, you can go to a full production company that employs producers and editors to make podcasts from start to finish. They might have more people on the team. It's going to be more expensive. So when to outsource? I like to say that podcasts cost time or money. So you can, like I've said in my previous webinars, you can do it all for very little money if you have the time to dedicate it to it. If you do not have the time to dedicate to it, then you can pay money to have someone do it. You probably can't get anything done without putting either one or the other or a mix of both in there. So I say hire an editor or producer when you have more money than time. I know we're talking to small museums. I know none of us are like rolling in just random grant funds that we don't know what to do with. But if you have the money to create this programming, that can be helpful. Sometimes you might want to ensure that your podcast has a professional sound quality. Again, if you have a grant that is tied to something, or if this is a really high profile thing, or if you don't feel like you have the capacity in-house to get a professional sound quality, outsourcing can do that. If you want to tell more complicated or nuanced stories that require experience in putting together these complicated stories, you may want to outsource. For example, you've heard from the Vermont Historical Society, and they put together complicated, nuanced stories on their own. They put a lot of time into it. But if you don't feel like you have that internal capacity or that time or the will, you might want to outsource. How would you choose an editor or producer? This is a question I get a lot. The number one thing is to listen to what they've already edited and produced. If you like it, great. If you do not like it, and if you think it sounds bad, then don't consider them, right? Or listen to everything that they've done and get a feel for whether or not you like it or it feels like something that fits what you want to hear. Ideally, find someone who understands your organization mission broadly, so if you're looking to do something on, again, the history of suffrage and a history documentary, maybe a company that's only done sports shows wouldn't be the best fit. Not going to say they wouldn't be a fit, but, again, in the same realm. Ask them to walk you through their process from start to finish, so that you understand what to expect at each step. There is no assumed, like, no obvious, here's what goes through. This is kind of still a wild, wild west in terms of freelance editors and producers and production companies. Everyone's going to have their own process. Everyone's going to have their own system. So ask them to walk you through and make sure that you know where your staff and where your organization will fit in. And then get a few quotes. If one stands out for being much less or much more, ask why. I think I'm out of time. I want to talk a bit more about collaborative models, but if someone has it as a question, maybe we can go into that. You can always email me as well. If more questions come up, I'd be happy to help kind of direct you to kind of get that. Sorry, I'm stumbling over my words here. I would be happy to help. You can download these slides by going tinyurl.com/hhpod. And that's my webinar. So I'll turn it back over to the team.
Okay, thanks, Hannah. Boy, you went through a lot of material here today, and we actually have a lot of questions, and I know we're not going to get to all of them,
Okay.
but just to remind everyone that what we will do is try to take the questions and write them out in the Museum Hub community, and Hannah, maybe you can help with some of the answers. The first batch of questions seem to be around specific software models, and a couple of questions for you about Descript in particular, which is sort of a very intriguing software product. Just to be clear, Descript transcribes the audio from the files that you use, right? It's not your script. So in other words, it'll show you, will it capture people's verbal tics, ums, that kind of a thing? Can you do a global replace, take out all ums and it removes all ums, that type of a thing?
I think you can. I haven't done too much fine editing in there, but what you can also do is you can go through and like strike out something, and then once you're done, go remove all strikeout, and it'll just go there. Yeah, so play around with it, look at the tutorials. I'm not sure exactly that capacity, but yes, it transcribes the audio, and you might have to fix it, correct the audio in places. It's an AI transcript, but yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay, that's cool. Hannah, do you know if Hindenburg is a one-time fee or a monthly subscription?
You can do either one. You can rent it for 3 months, 6 months, or a year, or you can buy one time. Hindenburg Journalist is only purchased. It's like $100 and you purchase it once. Hindenburg Journalist Pro has some slightly added capacity that I don't think is worth paying if you're going to buy a one-time, but they offer the 3 months, 6 months, and 12-month rental, which can start you out if you want to just like drop $40 and try it for 3 months. But try the 30-day trial, and I think after that you'll kind of get a sense if it's worth paying for.
They do have. I know I get emails all the time from them, and they have sort of special offers too. So
get on the email list for sales as well. Yeah.
Are there tools and apps for recording phone conversations and suggested products for iPhone and Android and so forth? Does that make a difference?
Oh, phone conversations. I have tried so many ways to do that. There's not a lot of good tools. If you want to record a phone conversation, I would say try and get someone onto Zoom. You can pay. What I would do is pay for the Zoom upgrades so that you can have someone call in to a Zoom call and record from there. Or if you have someone older who really can't do it, can someone go over and record them talking on the phone to you, and you record yourself on your end, and so on, if they have a second device that they can talk on. Unfortunately, there's no easy tools for recording phone calls.
Okay. A related question is on use of mics, whether you use two mics if you have you and an interview subject, or whether it's okay to keep doing this back and forth. I suspect your Icelandic interview is doing this, right? Which was the phone bumps or the bumps. Is it easier to set up? And I guess the question is post-production, you can make anything happen, but it seems to be a little bit easier if you've got two going at the same at the beginning, right?
Yeah, if you're sitting somewhere, if you're in a stable situation, 2 mics for 2 tracks is absolutely ideal. That was a big mistake that I made in that audio, but I was walking around on a windy farm while driving around Iceland. So I used 1 mic and I went back and forth. I used the wrong type of mic in that interview. So I talked in the last interview about a reporter style mic or a shotgun mic. And I would go back and forth with that if you're walking and talking, if you're mobile. And then what I do in editing afterwards is take my track in Hindenburg or whatever and cut out the second person and drop them down to a second track so that I can then edit that on separately. And if for some reason you run the whole thing through Auphonic and it doesn't sound good, it doesn't come out even, like one person sounds okay, one person sounds bad, what I like to do is separate them out, export the unedited stuff, then run that back through Auphonic as a separate set track.
So it'll level out the volumes and so forth in case you were talking and your mic was over here and vice versa, right?
Yeah, hopefully to kind of play around with that. So again, if you can do 2 mics, that's ideal. If you're walking and talking in mobile, one will have to do.
Right.
Make do with what you got.
Okay, so there's a question here about making the digital content accessible. Let's see, is it my responsibility to make sure digital content is accessible or 508 compliant? Do you have shortcuts to make transcripts faster or software subscriptions that are pretty accurate? So asking, I guess, after the fact, do you actually provide a transcription of the entire thing on your website or whatever, and how do you do that?
Yeah, you absolutely should provide. Now, I have some old episodes, places that don't have, but for professional productions, for museums, you absolutely should have a transcript to make it accessible. What I usually do is have that in a PDF and link to it from the description, either in the in-app description, or point people to a website where you can find the transcripts. Make it obvious. You're going to draw people in. It's going to help you who want to listen to podcasts or enjoy podcasts but can't do it without a transcript for whatever reason. Again, so your options are a cheaper automated AI transcription like Temi, T-E-M-I, that you correct yourself. Depending on the audio quality, Temi's not great with some accents. Like even I know it's much better with American accents than even British accents, like let alone going to non-native speakers. If you want Rev, I think it's $125 a minute for human transcription, and that's going to get you almost perfect. You can put in a glossary, you can make notes in your speakers, and you might just have to scan through and correct 1 or 2 things. It's $125 a minute, but it can save you a lot of time.
Right.
But otherwise, there's no shortcut.
I would assume that keeping an archive file of the actual interview, the raw tape, is a good thing, though, just in case you need to compare what the transcription looks like versus what they said, or even if the person that was interviewed says, hey, wait, I didn't say that, you have something to sort of go back to, right?
Yeah, I always save I kind of talked about having the transcripts and then copying into a new document for my working file. So save the original transcript. That's great to have. You never know when you might need it. I like to back up my original audio files as well. Sometimes you've got to delete those, but I keep them for a while. But keeping the transcripts can be a great way if you have to delete your audio files for some reason to keep that interview as well.
Yeah, just a warning, they're big files, right? So make sure you have plenty of space.
Audacity is worse. So if you're using Audacity, it's going to take up a huge amount of space. Hindenburg files are much smaller and more manageable, but get yourself an external hard drive. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's see. Time for one more question. Here's one that's interesting about editing the workflow. So which is better in editing your workflow? Editing the audio and then writing and recording transitions between, or editing the text, writing the transitions, and then using the script, so to speak, to create the final audio piece? Any thoughts on that?
I would say the former. You want to write to the tape. So you want to listen to what's being said and write from that. Write what feels like a natural transition out of the audio that you already have. So if you do it the other way, it might sound a little, I've done it the other way and it sounds a little, it can be a little like choppy. So yeah, write to the tape, listen as you're writing your script, have your audio editor open, listen to the clip, write the script, listen to the clip, write the script. So that way it sounds like it sounds like you mean like it sounds intentional.
Yeah. And
natural. Yeah, the flow is there.
Okay, last question. It's on everybody's minds, I'm sure. What does better lemon mean?
Means nothing. I just wanted something that sounded like it sounded something, but didn't actually mean anything.
Well,
I wrote nonsense words until I hit 2 that I liked.
well, it sounds terrific. All right, well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you, everybody, for attending today's program. And of course, thank you very much, Hannah, for your expertise today and throughout the month in guiding us through the wonders of podcasting. If you all enjoyed this program, then please do us a favor and share it with your networks. We really appreciate your participation and hope to see you again in future programs. Stay tuned to museum-hub.org for more information on upcoming events. Please join us as we introduce our next module on video production. See you then. Thanks, Hannah.